I'm actually here on behalf of James Pustievsky, who is the chair of the SIG, who can't be here today. And I am very happy to welcome you to our sort of last of the academic year webinar. And it's really my deep and great pleasure to introduce Josh Polanin, who is our speaker for today, who is a principal researcher at the American Institutes for Research. I think Josh is I think most people know who he is. Josh is a well-known quantitative researcher with a deep commitment to the production and use of evidence synthesis methods. And he has published well over 20 large-scale meta-analyses. He is also, by the way, probably the person most responsible for this SIG, for the persistence in getting this SIG established. That was really Josh's efforts. And also on a personal note, Josh is a close colleague, and I'm really proud always to say that I was his graduate advisor. So today, Josh is going to talk about an exciting new tool in development, MetaReviewer. So go ahead, Josh.
Thanks, Terry.
Over to you. Mm-hmm.
Yes, for such a kind welcome, and thank you all for attending this webinar. I'm always proud to say that you were my graduate advisor, so the feeling is mutual. And I'm so thrilled to see so many people who took time out of your busy schedules to come take a look at this webinar. And I'm so excited to see so many familiar names and faces. I can't see all of your faces because I'm sharing my screen, but as soon as I stop, I'll take a look. So just thank you for sharing part of your Friday with me. So like Terry said, and as you all know, we're going to talk about MetaReviewer, which we launched in a beta phase last September of 2022. Before I even go to the next slide, I just want to let you all know, keep in mind that MetaReviewer, we're still in our beta updating phase, which basically means that if you were an early adopter and you logged on and signed in before November 15th of 2022, you have access. You probably already know that. Some of you have been using it. If you didn't get a chance to sign up before November 2022, we closed signups while we made some updates to the system and to the tool. Some of those I'm going to share with you today, and we're going to see live. And that also means that you won't be able to sign up today to use MetaReviewer. But if you go to metareviewer.org, which I will show in a minute, there's an interest form. And as soon as we have a launch date, it will likely be in September. You will be the first one to access version 2 of MetaReviewer. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. The other thing I want to mention before I move off this slide is just that I'm here representing an incredible team of people, some of whom are listed on this slide: Megan Austin, Laura Michelson, Sarah Pecco-Spicer, Ryan Williams. All of those folks are really part of the mind behind and the functionality behind a lot of what we'll see today. We have an incredible team of developers, software developers, who support this project, and we could not do this without them. They have stood this up in like a year and a half. And for anybody who's done software development or has waded into this, making a product like this available and for free that just works all the time is an incredibly large task. So thank you to the developers. This is funded by NSF, and we're grateful for them too. So with that out of the way, MetaReviewer. So some of you have probably seen a version of these slides before. I'm just going to show a few of these slides just to set the stage. And then I'm going to attempt to do live demoing, which, if you know me, you know scares me. We're going to try it all together. If something breaks, that's the fun of live demos. But I want to be able to show you what we have going on, especially if this is your first time seeing this tool. So just a little bit of context though, why did we create MetaReviewer? What is it trying to do? Why are we doing this thing? You all know that conducting an evidence synthesis or a broader scale at research synthesis requires just a ton of organizing, cataloging, and extracting various pieces of information from citations down to studies to effect sizes. And all of that can be quite overwhelming, especially if you're a novice, but even if you've been doing it for a long time, the amount of data that we have to keep track of from project to project is quite large. Reviewers, people who conduct evidence syntheses or research syntheses, turn to one of several options to keep track of all of this information. And all of them have pros and cons, although this list, I'm going to try to convince you, is mainly filled with cons. By far, the thing that people turn to most often is a spreadsheet. And a spreadsheet is great because we all have them and we can all access them mainly for free, and they're really easy to stand up, meaning they're really easy to just start collecting data with. But they fail pretty spectacularly as soon as you have any amount of data that's over than maybe a couple of studies and a handful of variables that you're trying to collect. So we are trying to move the field past spreadsheets and into something that is more organized and more useful for the process of conducting a systematic review meta-analysis. As people have realized this, organizations, companies have tried to create specific software for the systematic review process. If you have any experience with SQL or relational database software, you've probably tried to create your own project-specific software. That can be really useful and really helpful if you have those skill sets, or if you have someone in your team who has those skill sets. But if you don't, it can be an incredibly overwhelming and challenging experience to create something that's useful, and especially if you want to apply it to multiple projects. And there's specific meta-analytics software, but it's often designed with just the meta-analysis in mind. And a lot of it is now becoming outdated in the sense that it was written for a time where we were not collecting multiple effects per study. And so it's not designed in a relational way. So with those things in mind, we need to build and think about the next generation of software. And I should mention, there are some organizations out there and some folks out there who are trying to do this. I'm sure you guys know of the programs I'm talking about. I've used all of them. And some of them have pros, some of them have cons. I think that a lot of them fail in at least one of these three areas. They're not built with the new non-programmer in mind, meaning that they can be overly complex or complicated to access and to use. They're not often minded for collaborative issues, meaning that even things like doing reconciliation or double screening or double coding things aren't always set up for multiple people to access at the same time. And all of them, I think all of them, this is correct, are not really an equity-focused product, meaning that you have to pay for them. Some of them, yes, are on the cheaper side. Some of them are very, very expensive, as you might know. But even if you have to pay a small amount of money per month, you're still having to pay something for the software. And for folks who might come from less resourced institutions or are doing this on their own for the first time, paying any amount of money might be a barrier to conducting a high quality evidence synthesis. So we're trying to address all of that with MetaReviewer by creating something that's really useful to the novice user and also free. So that's what we have here. That's what MetaReviewer is trying to do. All of these things down below are aspects of the product that we're really proud of and that we think it will help move the field forward. This is really like the version 1 functionality that's available. We've moved beyond some of it, and we're going to talk about some of that today. But really, just if you haven't seen MetaReviewer, if this is your first time taking a look at it and thinking about it, here are some of the highlights. It's browser-based and it's cloud storage, meaning that you access it through the browser and it's a simple log in, and you can collect and store as much data as you want. I don't know, you've got thousands of studies, you've got 100,000 citations. There's no limit right now. There's no limit to the amount you can store there. The user interface and user experience is designed for somebody who has never done or has done very few systematic reviews and meta-analyses. So we've created a lot of templates, a lot of guidelines, but also just the user interface itself is point and click and is meant to walk the user through the process from start to finish. That also means that you can create a very high quality, easy to use and implement relational database with ease with a Google document, which if you've ever heard me talk about relational databases before, you know that's something that's what I'm really fond of. You also know it's something that can be challenging to wrap your head around and to create. We've taken all of the difficulty of creating the database away for you, and we've put it into a Google document, which I'll show you in a second. We've also developed some tools and applications that are built for meta-analysts. So we have an effect size tool that you click the effect size that you want to calculate in a dropdown, and the fields that you need to extract from the studies automatically appear. Similar to, like, if you've heard of comprehensive meta-analysis or some other programs that will do this, we've modeled it in the same vein. The data extraction, once you extract the information and put it into the database and you want to get it out, we've created some tools that will let you easily export all of the data, and it's all set up so that you can take it right into R or to Stata or whatever you use and start calculating your effects and running your meta-analysis. And then, like I said, it's free to use, and there's a ton of documentation, including lots of videos online that show you how to use it. Okay, this sounds all really great. Now I tell you where we're at in the process and what you can and can't do with it. And then I'm going to show you MetaReviewer in a second. So this is, if you can kind of see the grayed out part underneath this, this is the full, what you can think of as the full systematic review process, starting with the literature search and citation management, abstract and full text screening, moving all the way to the meta-analysis part. MetaReviewer in its beta launch last year was designed to do two very specific things. And it's these highlighted right here. It was designed to help you create a code book and a coding form and create a relational database with ease, and then use that relational database to extract study level or study and effect size information, and then export that information to whatever statistical software you want to use. We think that this does this really well. We think that, there's always room for improvement, but if you need a system for this part of the process, and all of us do, you can, as soon as it's available again, you can sign up for MetaReviewer and we'll do it for you really easily. We have, since the beta launch, we have added functionality that would allow you to do some full text screening. It's a pretty simple workflow, and I'll show you what that means in a minute. And in the future, we will definitely be adding abstract screening. And we've been talking about how we can add literature search and citation management functionality to the process, along with a whole host of ideas that we have in our heads for future versions. But right now, it does codebook data creation really well and extracting information really well. Okay, I have slides of everything I'm going to show you all, but I'm going to move away from the PowerPoint. While I'm switching, were there any questions or any thoughts at the start? I know I just ran through a lot in 10 minutes. All right. Okay, so I'll take a breath and then we'll just start in MetaReviewer. So if you go to metareviewer.org right now, this is what you'll see. And
Josh,
if you're,
can you zoom in? Can you zoom in
Yes,
just
I
a
definitely
tad?
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah Peckelspicer, everybody. One of our collaborators, team members. Thank you, Sarah. How about one more? There we go. Okay. Lots of great information on this page, especially if you're wondering about who's involved. In fact, do we have a little picture about everybody? Yeah, there's the team. There's our team right there. Take a look at everybody's pictures and faces, especially the people down here. Here's our great developer team. Shout out to them. All right, if you want to follow, if you have access and you want to follow along, now is when we'll start. If you don't have access and you want to have access in the fall of this year, go to this complete interest form, fill it out, and we'll grant you access as soon as it becomes available. So for now, I'm going to go to sign in. This is the sign in page. And this is the landing page. So my landing page looks different than yours. I've got lots of test projects and other things that I'm just creating and working on. If this is your first time, if you signed up for the beta phase and you haven't accessed it since then, or if you haven't played with it, you will have no projects here. I'm going to start by creating a new project from scratch, just to show you how simple it is to get going with your own project. So if you click right there, I'm going to create a new project like that. So if we just hit next throughout the next 4 screens, you would have created a project and you can start doing everything that you can do in this page on the project landing page. But if you have some of your information available and you know what you want to do in terms of adding users and some of those other things, I'll walk you through it. So next, you can add different people to your project. So this is one of the next phases. I always add Megan to every test project I create, because at this point, I think it's kind of humorous. I've probably created like 60 projects, and Megan's great, and I know she gets the joke. So we'll add her. If I needed to add other people, they're all listed right here. Each person can access or can be listed in a different role. These different roles have different profiles associated with them, which I won't go into at the moment, but it has to do with how much management they can access in each project. We'll click next. The next thing is the coding form wizard, and this is where I really want to stop and walk through some of the innovation that we put together here. The coding form wizard is designed to help you create a code book that we turn into a coding form. The code book is the Word document, the Google document, the thing where we list all of the questions, all of the data that we want to extract from our individual studies, right? At the start of this project a little while ago, we knew that we wanted to create some sort of template for folks to use to make it easy to create the relational database. Once we decided on this process I'll show you in a minute, we realized that we could help new users in particular with the process of developing the code book if we put together some questions, some typical questions that we usually see in a code book into these templates. And so we went and we looked at lots of different systematic reviews that have been conducted, some of which had been my own systematic reviews, some of which had been done by the Campbell collaboration or just other authors that we knew. And it turns out if you look across codebook to codebook, you'll see a lot of similarities in those codebooks. We're all collecting sample characteristics in about the same way. We're all collecting measurement information in about the same way. We're all collecting study level information in about the same way. We're all collecting outcome information and effect size data in about the same way. So it turns out that this labor intensive, human intensive process of creating a code book, creating the items, can actually be refined and simplified into a couple of different decision points, and we can help you produce a code book that's about 80% complete. And so I'll show you how we do that right now. So you can create a coding form from scratch using the application that runs behind the scenes. I'm not going to demonstrate that, and I would recommend that you don't use that functionality. I would recommend that you click on this use a MetaReviewer coding form template. And that opens up 4 different questions that you answer based on the systematic review or evidence synthesis that you plan to conduct. Questions about quantitative information, so effect sizes that you plan to extract, the types of groups that you plan to include in your synthesis, the sample age, and some information about fidelity. Answering these 4 questions, depending on the answers of these 4 questions, which I'm going to collect just the last one. But depending on what you answer within each of these questions will take you to a different coding form template, a code book that's ready to be used. I'll just show you what that looks like right here. It brings up a Google document that when you click on it, opens up a template. So if I zoom in here, you'll see that this is what we call a coding form template. This is the thing that you will take and make your own, and then eventually, I'll show you in a second, upload into MetaReviewer. And this Word document actually creates the coding form that you will use to extract information, put the information into in MetaReviewer. So this is doing the heavy lifting of, if you've ever used any type of survey software or any type of systematic review software where you're saying, okay, I want this item and I want the items to have these fields in them, or I want to collect this piece of information. You're sort of like doing all these little drop downs and like adding questions. We've taken that process and turned it into this Google document that you can edit yourself. So each one of these tables is a different field, so a different question, and then you can list out the different choices within that question. And this is broken down by the sections that you would create within your code book, and I'll show you how those are all connected in a moment. So after you've accessed a Google document like this, or after you've decided which template you should use, you get to a page that looks like this. You would create a copy of it, make a copy, and you'd put it into your own Google account. I'll show you why that matters in a second. And once you put it into your own Google account, then it'll be available to upload into MetaReviewer. Okay. If it seems like I'm going fast, because I am, and also because we've got lots of resources on this process and all the other processes if you need them. So let me move on to the next part, which is where I'm actually creating the relational database, the coding form, using that coding form template. In order to do that, we sign in to Google so that Google knows, so that MetaReviewer knows where to go in your Google account to find that coding form template. I know this is one of those things that makes us all a little bit uneasy. If MetaReviewer accessing your Google folder, we are accessing it so that you can take your Google document, the coding form template, and create a relational database with it. That is the extent of our use with Google. But you do need to sign in. Do that here. And it's saying, are you sure you want to do this? And I'm saying yes. And here we go. Once I do that, now MetaReviewer is connected to my Google Drive account. I've already got one created here. This is a coding form that lives in my Google Drive account. It's a copy of the saturated template for the SRMA, so for this seminar. And based on back on this tab, we are saying that you should go to the coding form template that you've created and modified for your own project. Find this specific part of the URL, which is after this D and before the edit. And you're going to copy that and paste it into this part of MetaReviewer. So it's a little bit hard to see, but up there, I'm going to copy it. And this is where the live demo gets really interesting, because now we cross our fingers and hope that right, because I'm using a, yeah, okay. So we're going to make this E2 and hope this part works. If not, I will show you what this looks like. One of the things that we've updated, there we go. One of the things that we've updated in version 2 of MetaReviewer, which I'm not using currently, is projects being independent of each other and with that live within your own username. Right now, in the current version of MetaReviewer, all of the projects are sort of connected within your own username, and therefore, when you try to upload a coding form and you've used that coding form in other projects, it will spring back an error at you that says you've already used this coding form for another project. So in order to get around that, you got to change the name of it, which I just did. Anyway, we fixed that in the beta, in the version 2 of MetaReviewer, but for now it still lives on in this version. So I did get an alert though that the coding form has been uploaded, which I will show you in a minute. The last stage is importing your citations. I have created a citation file, which I'm going to show you in a minute. Right now, you have to, once you get to this part, click on this little link that says use this citation template, which looks like this. It's a very small Excel file that should look a little bit like what you would see if you downloaded an EBSCOhost citation file in CSV format. We have set up the columns to mirror what it looks like when you download that file, with the exception of a couple of columns to the left here, which I will show you what those mean in a second by opening up different file. Which, there we go. This one right here. So just to zoom in on this for a second. So this is the citation file. These are all the citations that you'd want to upload into MetaReviewer. I've got 4 of them here. I've actually got 3 studies represented, but 4 individual citations and articles. And I mentioned that there's 3 columns here of note. This CIT is the citation ID. This PDF ID is something we're not using currently, so I'm leaving it blank. And we've got a study ID column. Basically, every single citation that you would download from EBSCOhost or wherever you download your citations from would be represented here with a different unique value. And then each individual study that you want represented in MetaReviewer has its own study ID and number here. We've got actually 3 listed here because these second 2 we have lumped together into one study. So this is the classic multiple citations, multiple reports, or multiple citations for one study problem that we have in meta-analysis. And the way we handle it on this part of the process, and what makes it easy in a second when you see it in MetaReviewer, is we treat both of the citations as separate IDs, but we call them the same study ID. So they're lumped together into one. With that, I've lost MetaReviewer. There we go. With that brief explanation of the citation file out of the way, I'm just going to go ahead and import those citations. Okay, it said it's successfully imported. And now with these 4 records, and now we have created our first project right here. Okay. I haven't been looking at the questions, but I see already that Sarah responded to one. Thank you, Sarah. Maybe I'll just keep moving through and then we can come back to specific questions so that I can touch on a few more functions that I want to show. There's 2 different primary databases. There's a citation database and a studies database. The citation database lists all of the citations, just like we saw in the Excel file. So here they are. The study database lists now 3 studies that we have to code and potentially screen as well. If you did see a version of MetaReviewer back in the beta launch, and you're coming back to it now for the first time, this is one thing that has gone through a major update this round. This studies, what we're going to start calling the studies portal, which we haven't changed to yet, but the studies database for now. It looks a lot different than it did 6 months ago. We've added columns and functionality for full text screening at the start, as you can see here. We've clarified some coding functionalities, and now there's a scroll bar, and you have the option. Some of the feedback we received was some users wanted to add additional information that could be used in project management on this studies landing page. So we've added the option of allowing users to create their own fields on this studies database. So that is right here. If you haven't seen this before, basically each one of these rows acts like a little portal into an individual study. And this is what we call the individual study landing page. And this is where all of the information that you are collecting from a project management standpoint about a particular study lives. So we've got some study information. You could add some description and some abstract and the study's name. Right now, it just says the study IDs because we haven't added anything else. We've got the citations. It's a big fancy study. If you had multiple citations listed here, like in Laura's study, you would see both of the citations listed right here. You can actually click on citation and it'll take you to the individual citation page where all the information about the PDF and other types of citation information will live. Eventually, this page will be where we conduct all the abstract screening, which we'll be working on after V2 is launched. For now, it's just the individual citation page and some basic information. Some more information on the PDFs. And then we get down to these workflow screens. And this is really where the project management stuff lives for the individual citation. And you can see that we've got now, again, this is an update from the beta launch. We've got 2 specific workflow places, one for full text screening and one for the coding process. So each of these drop downs is filled with basic information about the status and where things are. You can also assign individuals to screen code or screen at different phases. You can do the same thing down here like this. You can add reconcilers if you want. And all of this gets updated in real time, saved for you on the fly, and also shows up on your individual project page under tasks to complete. So if we went back there and looked at the project page, you would see that I would have at least one task listed in coding this particular study. More statuses here. So basic project management workflow. If we added additional items, if we wanted more items like this and we wanted to do something else on the project management front, we could add more of those items here. You would do that on another page, a separate page. I won't show you that right now because of time, but this is where they'd show up in this project management page. You can also see that we've got two other sections down below here. We've got a section for notes and history. This is just basic, adding notes for a particular study. And you can imagine that, as you're coding a study or as you're screening a study, oftentimes you run across an issue or something else that comes up in the coding process, and you want to make a note to yourself and also to your team members for your weekly coding meetings. This is a great place to keep track of it there. You can also flag a study for discussion, and this will create a little flag on the studies landing page so that you can easily find the study that you need to discuss next time around. Okay. Into the coding forms, if we click on this coding form, you'll see now we've taken that Google Documents, those tables, and it's turned into the place where a coder would extract the information and put that information into MetaReviewer. So each one of these is a dropdown associated with the various fields that you're asking or the questions that you're asking. And up here, we go to a different section in our coding form. And so this section really is where the relational database part kicks in. And so each one of these sections is associated with a different aspect of the study that you're coding. So the sample characteristics, the intervention and comparison characteristics, the measures, and then the effect size information. And essentially what you do is instead of thinking about coding in every row is an effect size, and I'm going to capture the same information in each single row, you sort of break those rows apart into the different, you can think of them as UTOs or PICOs, but basically the different components that go into telling the effect size what the participants and measures are that make up that effect size. So if you've got an intervention in a comparison group, you're gonna include information about the intervention in the comparison group. In the samples page, you would create individual little records for each of the intervention and the comparison groups for the samples and the conditions page. And then once you get to the effect size page, you say, okay, for effect size 1, I want you to find information for this particular intervention group, this particular comparison group, and this effect size is for that specific contrast. Probably the simplest way to think about it is in the measures page. Imagine you've got multiple measures, but just two groups, an intervention and a comparison group. So if you had 3 measures and you wanted to collect information on each one of those 3 and collect 3 different effect sizes for each of those 3, then you would have 3 different little measures columns here that would represent each of those 3 outcomes. Then once you get to the effect size page, you put all that information together based on these dropdowns, which I'll show you in a minute. And those dropdowns identify the connected information from those records back to the other sections in your coding form. So let me show you what this looks like in practice. I've got another project set up. It looks exactly like this one because it is. But now, instead of having nothing in the project for this particular study, I've got a little 1 here that represents that there is 1 record for this study. So like one person has coded this study 1 time. You can see that I coded it. I worked on it this morning, very early. And I've coded some information at the study information. I've collected information for 2 groups, an intervention and a comparison group. And I've collected some basic information about the sample characteristics, the condition characteristics. So like what went into the intervention, how many people were, how was it assigned? How were they assigned? Who delivered the intervention? Was fidelity assessed or not? I've created 2 different measures here, a science achievement and a math achievement. So now I'm going to skip over to the effect size information. And I've already extracted information for one for one effect. Sorry, this looks a little weird to me. So there we go. And so what I've done here is I've said that for these dropdowns, it's asking me to identify the samples, sample 1 and sample 2, so the intervention and the comparison condition samples, and then and those sample characteristics that are associated with those two samples. And again, the condition characteristics for sample 1 and sample 2, so the intervention condition and the comparison condition. And then it says which effect size, which measure is this effect size on, and it's on our science achievement effect size. And that's all we would need right now to identify this particular effect size. And I'll show you how we collect the effect size information in a second. If you wanted to estimate or collect information for a second outcome, in this case, math achievement, we would go ahead and add a row. So we'd add another effect size here. And we'd again say that this is for our intervention and comparison groups. Those are the sample characteristics. And here's the condition characteristics. But now, instead of saying that we are going to collect information on science achievement, now we're going to collect information, effect size information on math achievement. The other nice thing you could do here is, let's say you wanted to use, math achievement as your outcome, but you're interested in maybe standardizing or maybe accounting for the differences in the conditions on science achievement. You can go ahead and change that pretest values to science achievement here. The last thing I'll show you on this page is that from an effect size standpoint, if you scroll over here, you can see I've already got some information already set up. This drop down shows you all of the various ways that we have set up MetaReviewer to make it easy to collect the information for a particular effect size. So when you click on one of these, the fields associated with that effect size magically appear for you. So in this particular one, I've clicked on SMD, standardized mean difference, that has pre-test and post-test unadjusted means. So when I click on that and I scroll over, you'll see that the fields associated with that effect size appear, and that's where your coder would enter the information. So the sample sizes, the pre-test and post-test, the means and standard deviations for the intervention condition at pretest, the comparison condition at pretest and post-test, and so on all the way over. And then if the authors estimated their own effect size, then you could also add it here. So if we did that for, if there was, say, maybe a different set of data that was represented for math achievement, maybe they've got pretest and post-test frequencies, for whatever reason, maybe it's a pass-fail type test or something. Now, when I click on that dropdown, you'll see that a different set of fields populate over here. Now it's the frequency data that gets populated that a user would input. Okay, running out of time here, so I want to make sure that I touch on one other thing, and that's just in case you're like, where does this data go? Where does this, how do I get the data out? I'm going to go to this is actually a live project. This is one that we're conducting on the 5Es. And this is all of the data that we've collected on this particular project. If I click download and cross my fingers, then an Excel file gets populated. And now it's taken all of that data that was by the various sections. So sample characteristics, intervention characteristics, measures in those various places, and it's connected it all together and back into an effect, like where every row is an effect size. So now I could go ahead and take this data set and put it right into R and start estimating my own effect sizes. Let me just double check that I haven't missed any functionality. If there's any team member on that wants to remind me that if there's something I haven't highlighted or something we've changed, please let me know. I don't see anything else though that I've.
Not any big things.
Okay.
But maybe pointing out, maybe just popping by the documentation, just showing
Yeah, that's a
that
good,
a lot of
thank
it
you.
exists.
Yes. So if this is your first exposure or maybe your second exposure to MetaReviewer and you're a little overwhelmed by what's available, we get it. So if you go into this documentation page, this is where we list everything that we've got available right now for you all to use. This how to use MetaReviewer is our user guide. Sarah, the lead author on it. It's got a lot of great information, and not just information in like the typical like text way, but we've got it's set up to make it really easy and interactive. So there's call out boxes, there's screenshots everywhere, there's arrows all over the place. If you have a problem and you can find this document, you can likely solve it yourself.
It also
There's
comes with like a toy example with data and a code book. So if you're scared to get started with your own data, you can fiddle around with a toy example first.
Yeah, exactly. We welcome people playing with it, especially when we launch again in September. We're going to be looking for user feedback in terms of, you know, what works, what doesn't, but then also just like what breaks when you try to do something. The best comments that we get are, we tried to do this one thing and we can't do it, or we wanted to do something different, or we wanted to function in a slightly different way. That really sets us off down a path of, okay, how did we set this up originally? What's the workflow, and how do we change it in order to make it be really useful to our end users? There's also a series of videos. 4 of them are listed here. If you click on this link, it'll show you the 5 of them. We plan to create many more videos that are all really pretty short, aside from our launch video. So take a look at those. I feel like I could go on about lots of other things, but I think I'll just pause there for a second and see. I see, Sarah, that thank you for. You probably
There's
didn't
definitely
realize.
still questions for you to answer.
Okay.
I figured out where they are. So
okay,
one
great.
is,
Oh, yes.
so one question is from, and Kamal, were you ready? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was ready, but go ahead. Unless you want me to.
No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, one question that Sarah did answer most of the questions, by the way, but she left this one specifically for you. LEU asked, how would you recommend inputting risk of bias 2 in the coding form with an algorithm built in to calculate the risk of bias, or to make the risk of bias question dependable based on previous responses?
Yeah. So the first thing to know is risk of bias. The items themselves could be easily added to this coding form template. You could create its own section. So you can have, like what I showed in those dropdowns, you could have a risk of bias section. You could also add the questions to the intervention condition section, and it just sort of be a tag along thing for each intervention that you're calculating. So that's the first thing, just the approach of adding the questions themselves. In terms of making the answers dynamic, or maybe certain fields populating or certain things populating after users click on certain options, we don't have a great way to automate that in the Google document as of yet. We have done it through the template is here. In fact, if I scroll down to this effect size section, it's relatively straightforward. Like you could totally do it yourself. You just sort of tell MetaReviewer what the choices are, and then there's additional conditional logic that you insert into these tables that allows for certain fields to populate or show up and others not to. So from a fields appearing and disappearing aspect, that's pretty straightforward. If you're talking about calculating or taking text and turning it into something else, like a calculated field would, the engine behind MetaReviewer allows you to do that. You have to use a GUI. You have to use the GUI to actually do it. It's in the editing of the forms. And then if you go to edit form right there, this is called Survey.js. This is an open source tool that allows people to create browser-based surveys. This is the thing that powers the coding form extraction. And you can create dynamic logic this way. It is not something that we have included in the user's guide yet, because it's pretty complicated. It's not something that we ourselves have done a lot of yet. But there's a lot of great resources. In fact, I was on the Survey.js website this morning and was able to add some new functionality myself to a coding form. So that's how you would do it. But we don't have anything automated other than this fields populating and going away as of yet.
Thank you. So I was going to ask an effect size question next, but Terry just answered it, and I can come back to it if either of you want me to. But Sophie Carlisle asked, could MetaReviewer be used for reviews of single arm, before-after studies, or is it primarily set up for reviews of RCTs and comparative studies?
It could absolutely be set up for single arm trials, especially if you're talking about within person trials, like a pre-test, post-test type thing. It could absolutely be set up for that. It can be set up, it will be set up if there's an effect size involved of any type, of any shape or size, from any armed trial or anything you can think of. It will absolutely be flexible enough to use in that way. And now that with this beta launch, with this beta update, excuse me, and with V2 coming out in the fall, users will be able to use the survey, the Google document and the creator to create coding forms that do not have an effect size page. One of the things that the beta launch, we said to people, you have to have an effect size, and the last page has to be an effect size page. We've taken that requirement away, and so now you could do qualitative syntheses if you want. And that's the reason we could do full text screening, is because full text screening is just one single page of just a series of questions and whether or not it's eligible or not. All of that functionality is now set up. So yes, it's flexible to handle that. Just because I saw, yeah, I just want to, sorry, Kamal, I just want to show that somebody asked about like a Excel file that comes out. This is the Excel file. It's at the effect size level, and but it's all connected. It's not separate. It's not separate based on the pages. We've taken all that information from each of those pages, put it into the level of the effect size. Sorry, Kamal.
Oh no, you're fine. That was the exact question I was about to ask.
Okay. Great.
And I think that the last question is just people are just having trouble accessing the resources, and they were trying to see if the resource page was only available once you are logged in and have an account.
That's correct. I don't think, Sarah, what did we
Yeah, I think we had it. There might be, you'd be able to, if you go to the FAQ, Josh.
Yeah.
There might be a linked documentation in the FAQ. I don't remember if we removed it from there. I did share, though, a link to the YouTube channel that has a number of videos that are all included on that resource page. The only resource that really exists behind the login is the user guide.
Yeah.
Everything else is a link to a public page like the YouTube account.
Yeah. We'll talk to the team about getting the user guide and the FAQs, although it's not all that useful if you don't have access. So. But again, this will be fully accessible. We don't plan on taking it offline at any point after we release version 2 in the fall. So once it's available, we plan on making it available for all and for free as long as we can continue to find funding for it. But we expect it to be free for at least the next handful of years.
Josh,
that's
did
it
you
for the
share any?
questions. Go ahead, Sarah.
I was going to say, Josh, did you share or want to share any of the exciting, like our immediate next step that we're working on?
Yeah, well, we've redesigned some of the access. We've streamlined a lot of the workflow. So we think it's going to be, we already thought it was fairly easy to use, but now we think that the navigation is really going to be set up and with an eye towards efficient workflow. We have been developing reconciliation functionality, meaning that two users who independently code the same study, a reconciler will be able to come in and view those two coded studies side by side, and it will automatically tell you where there are conflicts, and you'll be able to resolve those really easily. We're working on calculating effect sizes within MetaReviewer. I don't know if it's gonna be ready for V2 launch, but I expect it to be ready probably by the end of 2023. So that's something that's gonna rival what other software does, and especially what comprehensive meta-analysis does. And there's other small things, but Sarah, is there something else big that comes to mind? Yeah, reconciliation is the biggest.
I think so.
Yeah, there's a bunch of other like user workflow things and UI things that once you see them, you think, well, they'll be nice, and then you sort of forget about them. Like the whole goal behind a better UI and a UX experience is that like you notice it the first time and then you never think about it again. That's like the ultimate UX. So we're really striving for that. In the future, at some point in the coming years, in case somebody asked this is going to be AI powered. This is where it's going. Just say it now. Planting the flag. We've got a vision. I like literally wake up thinking about how to incorporate it into this. So at some point in the next few years, there'll be a webinar where we start showing you how you can chat with PDFs and extract information automatically, and then you start validating what it extracts. I don't think it's that far away, actually. So that's the future. But for now, we think it's a really nice tool that will do something really well for you.
Well, thank you so much, Josh. And I know we're all really excited to use it and see it. So thank you all for coming. I just want to say this was our last webinar for the academic year. If you have suggestions for next year, please send them along to me or to James or any other members of the SIG. And again, this webinar will be posted on the SIG website. So have a good summer. Thanks for coming.
Good to see you all. Thank you.